Hi everyone, today we're going to be creating a simple item shop where our player can make purchases. We'll be expanding on our earlier project for the NPC dialogue system, so let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, so here's what we're working with starting off. We have a player blueprint, and I can move around and, do different things. And then I have these NPCs in the world that I can go to, push a button, and then actually talk or interact with them. So what we'll do is we'll expand on this and we'll basically create some item vendors that can sell some items that we can purchase to add to the player's inventory system. The way we're going to accomplish this is we will use what's called a structured data set, which will hold all our variables relating to the item names and the item costs and whatever else you want to add in there. And then this can be inherited or passed over into the NPC blueprint. The NPC's blueprint can then use some game manager logic to move that into the widgets, and then the player can interact with the widget blueprints to actually make the purchases. So let's go ahead and start off. What we'll do is we will create our data set, so we can right click, select blueprint, and choose structure. And then I'm going to call this struct underscore shop items. We'll double click to open this up. In the structured data set, you have two tabs. You have your values tab and your structures tab. We'll start in structures. To make this video as short as possible, I'm just going to add one structure. We're going to call it items. If we expand that out, I'm going to check both boxes, and I'm not going to add any tooltips or anything, so I think the defaults will be fine. But my default data type is going to be a string, and then I don't want to use a single. I actually want to use a map. A map is basically a key value pair, so you can add two different data types and they pair together, which is perfect. The downside to this is each item does have to be unique, so you can't have duplicates. If you need duplicates, then you'd have to actually go with an array, would be the method to use. But for this one, we'll use string for our first key, and then we'll use an integer for our value pair. So if we go over into the values, you can see we have our items set here. I'm going to hit the plus sign to add our first item. I'll give it a name. We'll call it cracked bat, and then we'll give it a cost. It'll be $18. Then I'm just basically going to repeat this till I have about 10 items that we can use in this prototype. All right, these are going to be my example values I'm going to use for this data structure. So we'll go ahead and save, and we're actually done with this. Now to set up this logic, we're going to be working in 2 blueprints and 3 widgets. We'll set up the logic in the NPC blueprint first. So that's going to be this little guy right here. We're going to go to the event graph. There's not too much going on. Most of this was set up in the previous video. I did add some look code to turn the NPC using the find look at rotation function and then just rotating the actor. So if you want to do that, you can as well. You just need a default rotation value when the NPC spawns. But we have 2 overlap events. When basically the player overlaps with the NPC, we do this logic. When the player leaves the sphere of the NPC, we do this logic. So the only thing we need to do is we need to create 2 variables. The first one can be our item shop Boolean variable that will make instance editable. And then the second one is going to be our inventory variable that's going to use the data type that we created on that data structure. So it was struct shop items, I think it was. And then we're going to make that public facing as well, so we can edit it in the outliner. And then when we overlap with the player, which is this one right here, the begin overlap, we simply just want to come into a branch check. And we're going to check if this NPC is indeed an item shop owner. If they are, then we want to get our player reference that we created in the previous video. And then we want to call some logic. The logic we want is maybe we'll call item shop. You'll notice it doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and just create that really quickly. We're going to head over into our player blueprint, and in the event graph, we'll just find an empty spot, and we'll add a new custom event that we'll call item shop. The item shop does need to have an input, and we need to pass in our shop inventory, that we'll call it, which are basically the items that the NPC is carrying. So this one is going to use the same data type. Struct shop items, I think is what we used. Yep. Once we compile and save that, we can head back over to the NPC, so this guy right here, and then off the player reference, we can call the item shop event, and then hook this up on the true pin, and then we just need to pass our NPC's inventory over, like so. So we can compile and save, and believe it or not, that's actually all the code. It's going to be all the code we have for the NPC. So now we can head over into the player blueprint, and we're going to be doing a lot of the logic in here. Starting off in the event begin play, we are creating two widgets. We have our dialogue widget, and then we also need to create our shop widget, and then we're storing it as a reference. After that, we have the input action for talking. We want to come into a branch check here, and we need to basically check if the NPC we're talking to is a shop owner. The way we can do this is we can use a variable called item shop, and then we'll basically just pass this in here as the condition check. And then if it evaluates to true, we can use our shop reference, and we can call an event called maybe sell screen. Now you'll notice this doesn't exist, so let's create it real quick. So this is on the shop widget, which is going to be this widget right here. We can come to the graph editor. We're not going to be working in tick or pre-construct, but we can create a custom event called the sell screen. And then we will compile and save that. We'll head back to the player, and then off this, we'll just call that sell screen event. And then on the true pin, we'll hook that up, and that gets us pretty much what we need for this section. Now we are going to need some additional variables, so we might as well create those now. One variable we'll need is our wallet. This of course is going to be an integer because that's how we're going to be doing all the math, you know, for the dollar amounts and the costs and stuff. We'll initialize it to be 500, so we'll give our player $500. And then the next thing we need, of course, is an inventory. So this will be the player's inventory. We'll just use the string data type. We do need this to be an array, so not a single. We'll swap it up here to an array so it can hold multiple items. And then we can compile and save here. And now that we have that set, we can begin working on some of the other event logic that we're going to need to set up to be able to make this work. The first thing we'll want to do is on the clear dialogue. We're currently setting the can talk to false. We'll want to set the item shop to false as well. Once you do that, we'll need to set up the logic to handle swapping from the input mode of the game to a UI mode, which is for the user interface for the widgets. Typically you don't want to use the game mode input while you have widgets. Sometimes you do, but what you'll find is when you're interacting with the widgets, the player's moving around in the background as well. So maybe you want that, but for this prototype, I do not. So underneath the item shop, we'll create a new custom event. We'll call this one start shopping. And then we need a reverse of it, so could use a Boolean logic in it, but we'll just do two separate events. We'll do finish shopping to make it easy. And then we basically just want to take our shop widget reference, and then we want to add it to the viewport. And then once you have it added to the viewport, you want to get the player controller. Once you have the player controller, you can then come into a set input mode. Three modes you have are game and UI, game only, or UI. We're going to be swapping to UI only. And then what I can do is I can use the shop widget as the widget in focus. And then for the lock, I'll set it to lock always. And then last but not least, you'll want to duplicate your get player controller, because we'll probably also want to set the show mouse cursor. And then we'll set that to be true. Now on the finish shopping, we're going to do something similar. We're going to get the widget, but instead of adding it, we're going to remove it from the parent to get it off the screen because we're done shopping. And then we want to get our player controller, and we want to set our input mode to game only. And then you want to use the exact same logic here for set show mouse cursor, but the only exception being is we're going to uncheck and set it to false, so the mouse cursor is hidden. All right, now that we have that, we want to handle the logic for doing the math for subtracting the money from the wallet versus the price of the item. So we'll just add another custom event just called transaction. This one's going to be slightly different because it's going to have two inputs. The first input, we can maybe call it the purchase price. That's going to be an integer, of course. Second one will be the item, and that, of course, is going to be a string. And then all you just need to do is you hold the Alt key, drag wallet out. This gets you a setter. Then you hold Control, drag wallet out. That gets you a getter. We need to get the current wallet, and we need to subtract the purchase price of the item. And then we can set that to be the new wallet amount. So hopefully that made sense. Then after that, we just want to grab our inventory. So we'll do a getter. And then we want to do an array operation called add, which will basically do what it says. It just adds an item to the array. And then we'll hook up the execution pins, and the item we add is, of course, from our transaction. We just pass this in like so. And then that's the entirety of the transaction code. The other thing we'll need is we need to set up the logic for our item shop. I guess for this one, we'll need to get our widget reference for the shop. And we want to basically call some event that loads the inventory items. So basically passes the inventory from the NPC to the player, which is acting as a game manager in this example, and eventually to the widget. We don't have that set up, so we will go to our shop widget. So we are back over here. And then I'm going to drag this down a bit, and I'm just going to create a custom event that we'll call load inventory items. Now, because we're passing that structure, we need that input pin. So we'll hit the plus sign to add that pin, and then we just call this our items. And then the data type, it's just easier if you search struct shop items, and that's the data structure that we created at the beginning. We can compile and save. Now that it's set up, we can go back to the player character or the player blueprint. And then I can pull off and do load inventory items. And then I can pass this in like so. That looks great. And then the last thing, of course, this is where we can set the item shop to be true. So we got the item shop true here, and we're setting it to false in the clear dialog section. So that's how we're going to basically gate the logic for swapping back and forth. All right, so that pretty much sets up, I guess there is one other thing we'll want to do. I have a debug button, so this is optional. You don't have to follow along with this. But what I want to do is when I push the R key, I want to see what's in the inventory. So I can pull off into a for each loop, and then I can do a print string, pass the array element into here, and then I'm just going to execute like this. This just gives us a way to see when we buy items if the player actually got the items after we exit the shop. So it's just a debug thing. Feel free to skip this. But all right, and we are done with the player blueprint. So we're going to head over to our first widget. Well, the the first widget in the process, which is the dialogue widgets. This is what we created in the last video. It's very simple. It's just a border with some scroll box and some text. Nothing fancy here. If we go to the graph, we set up most of the code in the previous video. I'd recommend, if you want to see how we set it up, you can go over there or just take a quick screenshot of everything you see here. It's basically just a typing effect is all we're really doing. But the only change we need to make is we do need to cast to our player blueprint, and I am using the third-person template, so I'll use a third-person character. To be able to fill out the object field, the third-person character inherits, well, at least the player blueprint, inherits from the player character. So you can do get player character, and that'll fill out your cast correctly, so it'll succeed. And then you can promote this to a variable called player reference. And this is really all we really needed, because at the end we have this typing effect that runs every small amount of seconds, where it types out one character at a time. At the end of it, it checks if it's finished typing the entire length of the string, and if it has, it basically stops it by closing out the timer. So after that, we'll want to do one last check, and we want to use our player reference, and we want to check if the NPC we're talking to is a shop owner. So if they are, then we want to basically start shopping. So we can use our player reference and call that event called start shopping. And this is basically how we control if we actually load an inventory screen on the player's screen. Basically, if the NPC is marked as an item shop, we'll do the typing effect. After the typing effect finishes, if they're an item shop owner, we'll throw it on the screen. So this is the entirety of the code in the dialogue widget. So there's just 2 changes really. All right, now we can move over to the bulk of this video, and this is going to be probably a long video, but this is going to be the shop widget. So I think starting off, we need to do a couple things in construction. We of course need to store our player reference because we're going to be using that a bit. But the other thing we need to do is we need a way to update the dollar amount shown right here, and we could use that with the wallet on the player blueprint. So I think to make it easy, we will create a new custom event called wallet inspector, because we're going to need to do this a few different places. And then we could just simply in construction called wallet inspector. And we'll set up that logic in a bit. The sell screen is going to be the biggest logic, so we'll save that for last. The load inventory items, that's pretty easy. We're just going to break it. And then once we have it broken, we can just promote it to a variable that we can maybe call our inventory list. And that's it. That's the entirety of the load inventory items. Pretty simple. Now, because we're creating these widgets programmatically, and we've come to the decision where we're just going to make one widget that is set up programmatically at runtime. So because we're doing that, we need a way to reuse this widget. So essentially we need a way to set up all the buttons and the text and all that stuff, and then we need to have a way to clear it, basically dump all that out. Because some shop owners might have more items than others, they might have different items. You need some way to clear the screen. So let's go ahead and set up another event that will do clear inventory, oops, spelled that wrong, inventory items. So what we can do to clear is you can just hold control, drag out your inventory lists, and then, because this is a map, there's a handy function called clear. We just pull into this, and that does the nitty-gritty. Now the other part of this that you need to do is, the way we're designing this is we have this shop border here, and on the shop border we have a scroll scroll box items, this thing right here. We need to basically, because we're going to create a bunch of buttons at runtime and a bunch of text blocks at runtime, we need a way to delete all those. And rather than doing them individually, we can use a parent container, which is what we're going to use here, the scroll box items. And then we can just dump that, and that'll be a lot easier, at least I think. So we can use this as a variable. So if I select scroll box items, you can see in the top right, I check the box for is variable. So I can essentially just drag it out like so, get a getter, and then do clear children. And that'll just delete all the items there. And then this is basically good to go. Now the next thing we can do the wallet inspector, since we're here, I've been looking at it for a bit. The wallet inspector, it's kind of much the same. There's this border for the wallet, and then there's this text block for the wallet. I set that to be an is variable, so because of that, I can grab the wallet text, do a getter, and we can call a function called set text. And I'm going to put this over like so. And then all we need to do is we can use our player reference to get our wallet, right? So now we know how much money the player has. We'll probably want to make it look nice and pretty, so we can use a string append. And I'm going to add a pin. And I can add a $sign at the beginning. Oops. Oops, $sign there. Okay. And then at the end, I can add a 0.00, and then I can just pass the wallet into the B channel. That way it'll display, because we're just using integer, so it's like whole numbers. So this will display kind of like this, where it's $, the integer, and then 0.00. But all right, so we got that set up. We'll just pass this in like so. And then hook up the execution pin, and then the wallet is good to go. Now, we do need a way to exit out of the widget. So going back to the player blueprint for just a smidge, we were setting the inventory mode to UI. When you do this, you lock yourself out of the ability to call your input actions and a lot of your events on the player. So you need a way to kick yourself out from the widget. So that's basically what we need to set up. So in the designer view, you can see I have this button called exit. If I highlight that button, I can go to the right side, scroll down, and I have these events I can add related to that button. I'm going to use the one for on clicked. I'll hit the plus sign. It'll add an event for when that button gets clicked. And then I can do some logic for when that happens. So when we click exit, I want to do three things. So I'm going to drag my player reference out. I'm going to duplicate the player 3 times, well, twice. So we have 3. And then I want to first call the finish shopping, right? Because we're done shopping. Second, I want to clear the dialog, so we're ready to talk to a new NPC. And then third, I want to close dialog. And we separated that in the other video. These two things were tied under one event. We separated them out in this one because I thought it would be fun to have follow-up interaction with the same NPC. So we needed a way to basically silo those two functions, those two events. So now they're separate. And this is almost done. There's just one other thing we need to do. If you remember, we had the clear inventory items. So we need a way to basically wipe the screen. So we'll do clear inventory items. It doesn't require a player reference because it lives on this blueprint. So this is good to go. And that's the all the easy code. Now we're going to go to the actually hard bits, which is this thing right here. I'm going to drag this way down here to give us a lot of room. And I do apologize because this is probably going to be a little bit to go through because it's quite long. What we can do, we know we have an inventory list for that inventory, or for each item. So we do a for each. We can do some action on each item. So we know the inventory has two things. It has a name of an item, and it has the cost for an item. What I want to do is on the left side, I want to have a button, and that button needs to have a text element for that item name. On the right side, I want to have the price of that item, and I want that all in one line. To be able to achieve that, we're going to need to construct another scroll box, because you can see this scroll box right here is set to vertical. We're going to need to construct another scroll box that's going to be horizontal, and we're going to make it a child of this scroll box. Then inside that scroll box, we're going to add two children. One is going to be a button, and the other is going to be a text block that has the price. So let me show you what that looks like. So on the loop body, we'll pull into a construct object from class, and then we'll do a scroll box, and it's just a regular scroll box here. And then I want to promote that to a variable because we're going to need to reference it. I will call this the inside scroll box. And I'm going to maybe lower this a bit so we can see what we're doing. Okay. So we got the inside scroll box here. All right. Now we want to pull off and add that as a child. So there's a panel node here. You'll notice it added it as a target. That's not correct. The inside scroll box is not going to be the parent, it's going to be a child, so it needs to go into the content field. What goes in the target is our scroll box items, because that's our parent. So everything's going to live inside this one. Once we've done that, I then want to grab a reference to my inside scroll box, and I can set that item's properties. Like I can call set orientation, for example. And then I'm going to set that to be a horizontal orientation rather than a vertical, because I think it defaults to vertical, if I'm not mistaken. And that's pretty much it for the scroll box. So that's like this right here is just like the one scroll box code. After we've created the scroll box, we can create our first element, which is a button. So if I do create widget, I've created a widget called WBP_button, which is just this thing right here. You can see it's a separate outside widget. All it has is a button and some text. But you'll notice there's a problem with it. The first one being is we don't have an input for it to accept our string and our price. Your other question you might be asking is, why are we creating a widget when why don't we just do construct button for this one as well? The reason being is because we're creating these dynamically at runtime, and we want the buttons to have unique individual logic. Basically, when the player clicks them, we want them to do different things. When you want that, you need to decouple the logic between the button and the shop widget. Otherwise, you'll have no way to create unique individual event-based logic. Because the only way I found to do it is to basically use an event dispatcher. So that's why we have to have it separate. If somebody knows of a way to do it, maybe leave a comment down below, because that would simplify this a bit. But okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the button widget, and then on the event graph, we're going to need to create some variables here. The first variable, we could just call this maybe our label. It's going to be a string. It needs to be instance editable, and you need to expose it on spawn. If you don't do this, it's not going to work. And then the second variable is going to be our price, and that is of course going to be an integer. That needs to be instance editable and exposed on spawn. All right, now that we have that set up, we're going to be doing a few things here. On the event construct, I'm going to set the text element here. So in the designer view, you'll notice I have a button and I have a text block. My text block is a variable. That's perfect. So I'm going to grab that text block and I'm going to call the function that we already used on the other one, which is setText. And then the only text I'm going to set is the label. I'll pass it in here. It'll make the conversion, and then I'll just hook up the execution pins, and this is good to go. The other thing we need is, because we're decoupling the logic, we need an event dispatcher. So I'm going to hit the plus sign over here and call this event dispatcher. We'll maybe call it the item details. And then the event dispatcher is going to have two inputs. One will be a label. That will of course be our string. And the second one will be our price, which will be an integer. Okay, so with that set, you can drag your event dispatcher into the world, and you'll have some options here. The one we're going to do is call. And then when we call this, we want to pass the label into the label field, and we want to pass the price into the price field. But we need to have some event that calls this. Well, this is where the decoupled magic happens. So I can go to my designer view, and because I have the button hard created, as it were, I can select it, scroll down. For the on-clicked event, I can hit the plus sign. It adds that event here. I can hook this up like so. I can compile and save. This is now done. Now watch what happens when we go back into our shop widget. Go back to the event graph, and remember, we did the create widget node before. And when we did it that time, we didn't have a way to pass the input. But if I select the button widget now, you'll see it shows up, which is exactly what we need. So now I can just grab the label, pass it there, and the string, pass it there. And then the other reason why we did this is I can pull this into a bind event, and this should look familiar. Bind event to event dispatcher item details. So we could select that here. And this is the cool magical part, which I thought was neat, is you can pull this event and you can do add a custom event, which we've been doing, but check it out. You now have an input. You have your label and you have your price. And this is how we get that unique logic, which we weren't able to get before. I'm gonna give myself a bit of room. I'm gonna go maybe right here. And we'll add a couple reroute nodes to try to keep this somewhat organized. And then we'll just do that. We'll come into transact in a bit. I think we'll finish out the majority of this bottom code here first. All right, so we've created the button, and the button has a text element, so we're good with the left side. So now we need to set up the right side, which is just gonna be a text block. And actually, I did lie. We never added it as a child, so we do need to do that. So we'll compile, and we want to take this return value, and we will do add child. If it doesn't show up, we'll do remove the context. Add child is under panel. And it did add it as a content, which is correct. That is what I needed. The target is going to be that inside scroll box that we just created, like so. All right, so now that we have that, we can then do a cast to scroll box slot. And this is just so we can make some adjustments to the actual slot value, specifically with regards to the size rule. I think it defaults to auto, which if you set it to auto, it's going to run the left and right side together, so they're going to be touching. I want to use fill, so it puts one on the left, one on the right, so it actually works. But okay, so we got the cast scroll box slot. After that, we can pull off the slot and do size. I'm going to maybe check the box. If it doesn't show up, try compiling, and then try again. And you can see I have the set size now. I'll hook up the success pin here, and then I can drag off and do a make slate child. And you can see I have the size rule, automatic and fill. We want fill. And these blue nodes are basically panel setting nodes. So any item that you have, you can basically target any of these settings using these specific nodes here. Okay, so now that we have that, we can compile, and we'll pull off the blue pin, and we're gonna try to do set horizontal alignment. And we're gonna align this to the left. And if this tries to convert for some reason, you might just have to compile and sometimes disconnect some of the nodes and recompile, and then eventually it'll go through. We might run into that here in a bit. But okay, so we have that part set. So now we want to come into a construct object from class. This time we're going to use a text block. It'll show up just as text though. Once you construct it, we can target specific fields from it. So we can do the set text function. And this is where we're going to be passing in the price. So what I can do is I can do a string append. I'm going to add a pin, and I want to add the $sign and the .00, and then I want to return this over here, and then I'm going to drag this way back over here, and then we just want to pass the price value into the B channel. And that's perfect. Okay, so now that we've set the text to be the appropriate price, we then want to pull off and do add it to child. You can uncheck that and use the panel node for add child. Make sure it is under content, and remember the target for this is going to be the same inside scroll box that we've been using. And then after that, we need to do a cast to scroll box slot. And then we can do, as the scroll box slot, we can do set horizontal alignment. I'm going to do context sensitive. You see it doesn't show up. If we compile, we can try that again. Set horizontal. You see how it shows up now? It's kind of weird. And then we want this to be right side. And now there is one other problem with the text. On the left side, we have a box and text inside the box. On the right side, we just have text. So there's gonna be some slight margin or padding that's gonna come into play, so it's not gonna be even. So what we can do to prevent that is we just add a little bit of padding. So off the construction, we can do a set margin. And then I'm going to add a reroute node, just add this down a bit. And then we can pull off the margin, and we'll just do make margin. And then I'm just gonna add a slight top margin or top padding just to kind of even it out a bit. Now this doesn't complete the code, but it does get us pretty close, so I think we can see what we got. So right now we have 4 NPCs. I'm gonna select this one. I'm gonna check the box for item shop. And I'm gonna leave all 10 items on him. And then for the skeleton, I'm gonna set him to an item shop, but I'm gonna delete most of his items. Like so. I'll have a much smaller inventory. All right, so now if we play this, look here, you can see our inventory comes up. I can click on stuff, I can scroll through it, but nothing happens. But it is showing the correct pricing, the correct items. And then if I go back over to him, looks the same, that's working. If I go over to this guy, oh, I forgot, I changed his text to be really long. That's gonna be annoying, that's fine. All right, once it's finished, so you can see his inventory slots are a lot smaller. And let's actually go ahead and make him an item shop, and we're gonna make him only have a few items as well. Make him have 1 item. All right, but let's actually give us the ability to transact. So we'll go back to our shop, and we're almost done here. So after we bind the event to the actual transaction, what we can do is we can come into a branch. And what we want to do is we can get our player reference. We can get our wallet. We could check if the player's wallet is greater than or equal to the price. So hopefully this makes sense. And I'm going to drag this down a bit, and we'll add a rewrote node here. All right, so if the player has enough money to purchase the item, I'm going to call a function called pickAChatResponse. And then if they don't, I'm also going to call that same function, pickChatResponse. The pickChatResponse has a Boolean check, can't afford. I will check it on the top level and leave it unchecked on the bottom level. On the top level, we also want to grab our player reference. And on the player, we created that event called transaction, if you remember. And that takes in a purchase price and an item, which of course we have. We have the item, pass that in there. And we're gonna just add some nodes. And then of course we do have the price as well. And then we'll add another reroute node. Like so. Okay, so the last thing we'll need to do on this one too is we want to update our wallet. And if you remember, we called it wallet inspector, I think. And that'll just make sure the player's wallet gets updated on the widget. But what does pickChatResponse do? Well, I was trying to save a little bit of time. So I created a function called pickChat. It just is a cheeky little thing that basically creates a couple arrays for some positive and negative responses. And it'll cycle through those as the player continually talks to the NPC. There's nothing really else going on here, so if you want to duplicate it, the important parts here is that we're clearing the dialogue, we're preparing the dialogue, and then we're talking, and it's basically preparing that canned response back to the user. So I want to save a little bit of time because that wasn't the focus of this video, so this kind of is the important part here. So now that this is completed, we can compile and save. And if I did all this right, we can test this out. So I got 500 bucks to spend. I'm gonna talk to the orc. I'll buy a teddy bear. You can see I lose $178. I can buy a cookie, a yo-yo, crack bat, then I can exit. And then if I push the R key, you can see in the top left corner, I have a crack bat, a yo-yo, a cookie, and a teddy bear. If I go to this item shop, talk to them, he doesn't have anything to say, but he does have a slingshot. So if I purchase that, you can see he tells me to enjoy my purchase. If I purchase it again, an excellent choice. And then he can continue giving me things. And if I try to buy something when I don't have enough money, it should say, look at that, you're broke, go away. Come back when you get money. Sorry, I don't sell the deadbeats, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So we can see that's working. And then if I go over back to this guy, we have the same inventory here. It's not letting me purchase, which is good. And it appears to be working. And then I'll test this guy as well. Although I'm pretty sure he should work as well. The other thing we'll want to check too is if the non-item shops show the item widget. He doesn't, which is good. So we got that logic working correctly. But all right, good people, I think we'll cut the video here, but I hope you found some informative value that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.